I'm out of the meeting somehow. I don't know what happened. I can't hear anything. And now I'm out of the meeting. I'm so frustrated. I don't know what happened.
Committee of the Whole of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands. I'm going to set precedent. We've got some feedback happening in the chambers. We'll fix that. Somebody has a volume up, I think. So hang on. Okay. And I'll just do a test. So no, yeah, I think we're okay. I have my volume off here. I apologize to the public. This is like doing things all over again. We haven't been at it for a couple of months, so we got to get it right again. So everybody's volume is down, and we'll ask the counselors to use the microphones when they go to speak. Just as an aside, the delegation from the Friends of Springfield House, they will go first, and the council will have the ability to ask questions of the Friends of Springfield complex, or the Springfield House, I should say. And then the public, after that delegation is done, the next staff report is the operations report for Springfield House and Escott Hall. At that time, once the report is presented and the motion is made and it's on the table, I'll open the floor for questions from counselors, and anyone who is attending the meeting that would like to ask a question, we would ask that you use the raise your hand function. If you go to the bottom of the screen, it shows a little yellow hand that says raise your hand. Just click on that. Between the clerk, myself, and the other staff members here, we should be able to see your hand. I only ask that anybody who's in attendance that would like to ask questions, please keep your questions brief. There are a number of people on here tonight. I would like to get to everybody's questions if possible. And if someone's already asked your question once, or I'd ask that we not repeat the same things over and over again. And if you are unsure of speaking on this Zoom call, that we ask that you put your comments in writing and send them to the clerk here at the township, and it's clerk@townshipleads.on.ca to be put on record. So with that, I will move forward with the agenda. Oh, sorry. I'll ask for declaration of any interest or general nature thereof. Anybody have an interest this evening they'd like to declare? Seeing none, we'll move forward with delegations and presentations and move on to the preservation of the Springfield House complex. And I believe Mr. Birch is on the line, and he will be joining us via Zoom. So there we go. You are unmuted, Mr. Birch, and please go ahead.
Thank you, and good evening. And thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Gatke, and councillors and other members of the committee. We appreciate this opportunity to present to you this evening for the committee of the whole. In case some people don't know me, I'm Robert Birch. I've been the chair of the Friends of Springfield House for a while now. It's a group that was formed not long, in some form, not long after the library closed at Springfield House. I have a brief presentation. There's a few slides, just some talking points I'd like to show through, and I'd like to share the screen if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. The clerk says that you should be able to do that, so let us know if you have any challenges.
Oh, yeah, this is all fun and games for me. Did that do anything? Anything yet? Here we go. Is everyone doing something?
We can't see your slides, so you'd have to go to the bottom of your screen and ask to share screen.
I did, but let's just have a look at that.
And then you usually have to choose the screen that you want to share.
Yeah, okay, hang on. This is fun. Just take a second. try that again. Let's try that again. I've got share screen. What do I
Just click
friends-
on share screen.
Yep, done that.
And then usually there's a window that pops up.
There's a
that asks-
whiteboard. There's a whiteboard and there's an iPhone.
Are you on an
Friends is-
iPad or a computer?
That's a laptop.
So yeah, it should
There
come
it
up
is.
and then you'll see the screen with
These-
all of our faces on it. You're gonna wanna, if it's highlighted in blue, then you click the share on the lower right-hand corner. You may not be seeing it if your Windows.
Oh, is
Minimize.
it like a little blue? Okay.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to hit the share button.
Is that better? Share? Yeah.
There
They're
you
getting
go.
there. Did that do something?
It did. It's starting to share. It's just thinking right at the moment. There we go. So now you have to go into your
Yeah.
slideshow.
There you go.
Awesome.
It's coming. Technology, wonderful. Got anything yet? Here it comes. It's taking its time. So some of you were able to read the letter, of course, that was submitted along with the deputation, and thank you for that. These slides will just be to focus my conversation with you. Some of the councillors met with some of our group over the last year to talk about our concerns, and this will hopefully I'm not sure what's happening there. Are you able to see that now?
Yep.
Everything good?
Yep.
Okay, so the first slide is just the cover slide showing the two buildings in question. The stone structure, of course, is Springfield House, and the structure is the former town hall for Escott. For some of you members who are not from the area, they were both amalgamated with the township in the late 1990s. I just want to go over our mission statement: to conserve the Springfield complex as a museum, archives, and active cultural and heritage center for the township of Lees and the Thousand Islands. Friends of Springfield was formed in its present form in 2019 to advocate for the conservation of the complex for community use. We consider ourselves an umbrella group which represents the interests of individuals, groups, and agencies which are dedicated to preserving Springfield House and the former Escott Town Hall for their functional and heritage value. It was built in 1871. Springfield House is still one of the oldest intact commercial residential stone structures in the township. And we see these significant built heritage resources, who happen to both be celebrating their 150th birthdays this year, as important assets to our community. And that's just a quick overview of our mission. For some of you who are new to the township, we have been in this situation before, perhaps a much worse situation, when the building was first procured by the former township of front of Escott. It was in a very derelict state. It was restored, lovingly restored by community members, dedicated volunteers, It became a community hub for many years and hosted a lot of events, which I was happy to be a part of. It was a branch of the library. It was once the front of Escott Library, and then it became the part of the Lansdowne library system. It closed, the library, that branch closed in late 2016. We did go over with the staff report that was submitted. We have gone over that. And some of the deficiencies that were stated, of course, we are serious. Others we think could be rectified fairly quickly. There was work done on the floor when it was a library with double beams and metal supports to when it was converted over to a library. The municipal official plan does recognize that there may need to be exemptions for accessibility requirements, and that's usually in a situation where any type of changes to the structure would result in impairment to the structure or some sort of damage to the structure. So those are issues that we might come up with an heritage structure. We believe that the report by engineers or architects with an experience in historic structures and the adaptive use of such structures would be necessary before we make any decisions about whether to declare the property surplus. It's very important that we find out if the work that needs to be done in a way that preserves the historic nature of the buildings, because many of the recommendations would change the structure. Of course, it's 150 years old and has a lot of things going on with it. At one time, the building was, as you see, quite in bad shape. And considering that the building was used as a library recently and has been used by the public up until a few weeks ago, we feel that this particular building has potential to be brought up to standards with some support from the public and from private and public cooperation. We think we could do that. So we really wish to see this building continue to be used in the township capacity. We did see that in the 2016 municipal plan, there was money allotted to upgrade the structures, approximately $500,000, but that plan never came to fruition. And as we know that no such upgrades were made in the last few years. Another issue that we're concerned about that ties in with our group is the Lee's and the Thousand Island Archives. As you know, the Lee's and Thousand Islands Archives is a treasure chest to our community. It's composed of many items, documents, but also three-dimensional artifacts that belong to the township, and also as well to the Lee's and Thousand Islands Historical Society. We're so fortunate to have all these items curated and kept to the highest standards, and I've toured it, and I hope some of you have had the opportunity to tour the archives because it's maintained in very high standards, and they do a fabulous job of documenting and cataloging and making sure everything is able to be found. And as you know, currently there is an MOU to maintain the archives, but we feel the location of an archives, of course, is crucial. The proposal of moving the archives that was made from its present location, and we realize that the Escott Town Hall has issues, would be also very time consuming and expensive. You'd have to make sure that you do it properly with all the latest. And we would like to see that if that has to happen, that it would only have to move once. We really feel that moving the archives around is not something you want to do very often. And if you're going to move it, make sure you have the right place for it. We really would like it to stay in that complex, whether in that building or another one of the buildings on the site, so that the heritage aspect of a hub where people could come and be engaged with history would be in that site. So we would like the archive somehow to be able to be maintained in that site, given its historical nature and the fact that it draws people in just being in a historical place. We would really hope that any decision to move the archives would be made with these things in mind, and maybe just have a more 6-month wait time so we can get sorted out how we can move the archives if it has to be moved, and which is the best practice and how to get it moved safely. Another aspect would be the fact that our township of Leeds and Thousand Islands currently is one of the few townships that does not have an active heritage center or museum. We have been working with other local small museums in the area. We've contacted almost all of them. We've seen some of their annual reports. We've talked about how they run. They all run on slightly different models, and some are quite unique. Some involve complete ownership by groups. Some involve part ownership with governments, and they share costs and share looking after buildings, and that's something that we were working on. One of them is the Mallory Coach House in Mallory Town, the Little Red School in Elgin, and the Lynn Heritage Place. And we also have been talking to people from the Athens Museum and the new museum that is being formed in Portland. So we have a lot of ideas and great people that have been supporting us in our venture. Finally, I would just like to say that tourism, in light of the pandemic, has become somewhat limited. A lot of people are staying home. A lot of people are doing work at home. One of the things I know I've been doing is genealogy, and we happen to have one of the largest genealogical collections at the archives, some 200 families, and many people are very interested in working on their family history, and that's something, service that we, I think, could really promote and provide. And just the fact that the historical buildings draw people, and people who travel and want to experience places and artifacts and activities that they represent the past and stories of the people of the past. These people that want to do these sorts of things, they're generally older, they generally have well-educated, they often have higher incomes. So the type of tourist or traveler that we'd be attracting is someone who may want to stay in an area, go to a museum, look at the architecture, do some research, drive around, see the beautiful sights. And this is something that we see in places like Marrickville and Perth, where the heritage and preservation is very much in the top forefront. So we really feel that having a heritage complex like this would be a draw and an asset for our community. In the last slide, I just want to say that we do have an obligation, all of us, to serve the past, the present, future generations of our community. When I think of history, I think of the future. For example, the house I live in is, well, it was built in 1850, and many families have lived in this house. It's gone through its ups and downs. We are caretakers in this house. We are planning to live here as long as we can, but I know that this house will go on and on after we're gone, and someone else will enjoy it. And that's what history is all about. It's about making sure that the continuation, those links and those connections to the past. And I end with a quote from the township official plan, that the township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands embraces a mandate to preserve, enhance, celebrate its diverse history. And we hope that that's true, and we know that it is. So we would like to work with you as partners. We understand that there's a current fiscal deficit issues with the COVID-19. We understand that, but the fact that this property, in our estimation, is much more of an asset than it would be if it was just let go. It's a really lost opportunity if the township lost its only 2 heritage buildings that are in public use. That's all we've got, and once they're gone, you will not have any more. We really think that we can work with the government and the municipality. We know we can get access to grants. We have lots of plans on how to do that. We think that if the property was sold, the amount of money that would bring in would be a short-term gain, considering what the potential for the next 25, 30, 40, 50 years could be in terms of drawing tourism. So we really feel that we'd like to see the properties maintained in the township, in some partnership with the township. We would we'd be willing to talk about lots of just ways of sharing that responsibility of looking after the buildings. But we know that this is a great opportunity and we would hate to see it lost. So we really would just ask for this opportunity to work with you and to help conserve our history. And that's pretty much all I have to say on that. Thank you. I hope I didn't go too long.
No, thank you very much. So I'll take questions from any councillors that might have questions to put to the group Friends of the Springfield Complex. Councillor Maybe?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Some of the questions that came up, to renovate the archive area, it would have to be moved. So what size and climatic conditions would the archives require to do that if it was deemed that the building was to stay and be renovated and archives put back in, and whether the garage next door would be suitable for that little purpose on a short term being close by? Secondary question is what financing support do the Friends have? You alluded to getting grants and funding, but what do you have kind of in your roadway that you've kind of looked at already? Because you are undertaking a fairly major renovation if you do undertake this. So just like to hear what you might have in that line.
Okay. I would like to take the share off the screen. I just have to figure out how to do it.
You're not sharing. We're good.
Oh, good. We're good. Okay, great. I'm glad we're not sharing because all I can see is that. Well, to answer your first question, you were talking about the moving of the archives. The archives itself, we estimate, takes up about 1,600 square feet. It is measured in feet. It also has a cubic measurement as well in terms of its height and width. We think that it could be stored safely in the garage because the garage has a concrete floor, it's heated, it has electrical, it has some of the things. It wouldn't be a long-term solution, but it could be a solution for the time being if the items. The advantage to storing in the garage would be the one or the other buildings could be brought up to standard while they were in storage, and then you would just be moving them in a very short distance rather than taking them to a off-site area where they're stored and not used and maybe not secure. So we would think the garage would be a possibility. If for some reason the actual town hall, the old town hall, needs more work than can be done in a reasonable amount of time, there is a possibility of moving if the Springfield house was adequate, and we think because it was a library, it probably has some capacity for weight. We could store some of the things there. And I think your second question was about funding. As you know, it's a group that's just starting. We have our business plan involves meeting with other groups, starting out with our goals, our models with comparable ventures. We've looked at other museums in the area. There are community museum operating grants that are regular features. We know about those. There's heritage organization development grants, the provincial government's provincial heritage grants, Eastern Ontario Economic Development Fund. There are many ways of accessing it. Once we've almost been at our incorporation. It's just about ready to be done. We have our bylaws, we have our constitution. So we're very close to being ready to get operating. As for reserve funds or anything of that nature, at this point, we do not have any significant funds for that, but fundraising would be a big role. And what we talk to people that we've talked to are very keen to give us our support. So I don't know, that's all I can do at this time.
Follow up, Mr. Maybe.
Yes, thank you for all those. Again, having contractors in the area who can actually do work in kind also would be very beneficial to you. But I do feel that this project is going to be fairly large. Having deal with similar buildings on a daily basis myself, I run into a lot of issues with said buildings, and this is not a small undertaking. This group, I hope, do understand that if it's chosen to move ahead in that fashion, because it's going to take a tremendous amount of work for a small group to undertake and make this a viable and safe and habitable facility. That's all I'm going to say
Yes.
at this moment.
We totally agree. It does have some issues. However, we do feel that we would like to get the opinion of a architectural or engineering group that has heritage experience, just to give us that second opinion about if it's something that we could do, it's manageable. We wouldn't be willing to make any decisions without that kind of report. We just need another lens on the buildings in terms of what could be done and what are some reasonable things that need to be done, like a roof, things that, obviously there's things that we can fundraise for individually. The HVAC system is outdated. It'd be very important, especially if there's going to be an archive. So those are things we have to prioritize at the costs and get estimates. So if it's severe structural issues, I can see where that might be a difficult situation. But if it's heating, roofing, things of that nature, interior adaptations, I think those are within the group's mandate. But again, until we have a better idea of the nature of the deficiencies in the building. And I do feel that Springfield House, of the two buildings, I would say was in fair condition. I'm not being an architect or an engineer, but just knowing a bit about historical buildings, I've seen a lot worse, and they have managed to bring them up. But you're right, there will be a cost, but that's something that we're willing to investigate, and absolutely are willing to commit to fundraising.
Thank you.
For those things.
So I will recognize Deputy Mayor Lackey, and then I'll recognize Councillor Garreau.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, two things. The report that was in our agenda clearly identified the deficiencies of the buildings and the cost roughly to bring them up to a standard to which the township has to recognize, which is not the same as the standard of a private individual. That's one thing. You're talking about almost $1 million. So is there, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you're talking about two buildings. We may not be able to bring both buildings up at the same time. That's quite possible that we have to focus on the building with the best chance of getting up and running as soon as possible. So we're roughly reducing that by about half, perhaps, or maybe less. We also would like to get some estimates from what are the key things that would need to be done. If the things that, such as, I think some of the things were things like an elevator, and such things, I'm not so sure that all those things would have to be necessary right away. I think those are things that would be ideal. And the washroom situation, there may be exemptions for buildings of heritage nature that may not necessitate those expenses at the time. So basically what we're saying is we want to know what's the bare minimum, what has to be done, what is the cost going to be, get a couple of estimates from people who work with historical buildings, and they'll say, yes, you have to do this. And then we'll say, okay, we can do that. No, we can't do that. It's too much for us. But right now we don't have all that information. We have the information based on what an architect or an engineer would consider for a building for public use, such as a library, a gym, or an office building. And of course, those standards are important, but they may not be the same standards necessary for a 150-year-old building. That's all that I can think of that would be different between the two reports. It'd just be a different lens on it. There'd be a historical adaptive use lens, and then there's the general public modern building lens. And those are slightly different, I think.
Again, through you, we are talking about something that the township would have to take responsibility for. So there's no way to cut corners. We have people to answer to. We have insurance companies. We can't just say, let's have Joe Blow come in and say, well, gee, you don't have to do this or you don't have to do that. If we do it, we have to do it properly. We have to do it to the standard of our codes. And just to move forward beyond that, you talk about moving the archives. Perhaps the garage is a suitable location, but 1 Jesse Street is not. I'm thinking 1 Jesse Street would be a far superior location for your archives than a garage down at the complex, which
yes, you would think that, wouldn't you? However,
yes.
the floor space is very cut up in there. If you've ever been in there, there are a lot of common rooms that would not be able to be used by the archives. There's a seniors room, there's a meeting room, there's some small offices. We did measure the floor space in there, and it was deficient by about, I'd say we think usable space for an archives, we figured about 1,250 square feet, and we need about 1,600.
Sorry to cut you off. Did anyone tell you that all of those walls can come out?
We wondered about that. Yeah. Because they do seem like they don't seem like the offices, some of those smaller offices in the side there on the west side. If they could come out, that would have probably helped.
To my knowledge, my history, those walls can all come out.
Except the safe room. I think that's on.
You might want to keep that.
Yeah. So
Keep
I'm
all
going to
our
move.
money.
I'm going to move on to Councillor Gorell and then Councillor Olkey and then Councillor Fody. Go ahead.
Thank you.
No, you don't.
As per instructions. Thank you. Good evening, Robert, and thanks very much for your presentation tonight. Just a question, obviously there's been a lot of emails generated and a lot of very fine letters sent. Are you ready in a short order to roll with a working group for some realistic estimations of everything that has been discussed, cost? It strikes me that with the report that is next on our agenda, there's some pretty tough questions coming forward. And it certainly is a beautiful building and so on. So I would be personally in favor of some solid thinking from a working group. Now, I do have a couple of questions here. Who exactly? We have the Heritage Committee, we have the Historical Society, we have the Library Board, and we have the Friends of Escott. Who is leading the charge? And could a working group be put together of all of these people?
Yes.
What's your vision on that? And what kind of timeline just to formulate your working group? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's kind of where we're at right now. We have representatives from all of those groups in our umbrella group. I personally am a member of the Historical Society, but I'm not deeply involved. I'm not a member of the Municipal Heritage Society. I know I'm learning a bit more about them. We're all bring our own expertise and we work together with a common goal. And that goal is to preserve and conserve the complex for community use. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves right now and get going. I've been wanting to get in there for 2 years. The problem is we could never get any information until this report came out about the condition of the building the costs involved with the building. We asked for an energy audit for about 3 years for what would be the cost of running the energy, the electricity and the power. A lot of those things we had no information. It's hard to plan when you don't have information. So to say, are we ready and running? Yes, as much as we can be with the limited information that we have and are just getting. So we really feel that we could be ready, not immediately, but very soon. And we're more than anxious to get working with the township. It's quite possible that the work, we're not saying that the work that needs to be done does not be at code. Of course it has to be code, but we're just saying that there are heritage considerations that may make a difference in that. We do not want to have the public in an unsafe building, and I'm sure that no one else would want that. We just need to know that it's something that that is absolutely necessary to be done to maintain code. But and we don't want any, for example, widening the doorways is wonderful for people in wheelchairs. That's absolutely necessary, and more than accessibility is important. But in an old structure, that may have some detrimental to the building. So we have to make sure that the things that are done do not damage the integrity of the actual building. And so that's what we would have to have a study by people who know that, who do that all the time, and who are able to work with old buildings and reuse them.
So I'll recognize a follow-up, Councillor Gurrell, and then Councillor Olkey, and then Councillor Foti.
So again, Rob, just as a follow-up, and thank you for your concise report and answers. I would have no problem in turning this over to a working group to work through the issues realistically. I mean, reading our report that's coming up next on our agenda, and the aspirations for the buildings are pretty significant differences. And it looks, when I distill this down on a piece of paper, it's public access is going to be limited, and also the archives need to be protected, not just stored, but we have fire issues. There's just a myriad of things there that are all solvable, but I would like your working group to realistically, and I'm sure you're very capable, I would just feel very comfortable if your working group could think about a timeline that you might want to come back to council. When you put it together, it's fine for us to sit here and say, yep, we'll pass it off to a working group, but some kind of timeline. And I would personally feel a lot more comfortable if people were looking at those realistic issues of money and what does get to be done on a heritage building versus code for modern day, et cetera, et cetera. So thanks for your considerations on that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think we both agree on that. Thank you.
Councillor Olkey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Mostly, Councillor Gurrell has brought up my points. I'd just like to offer a few, perhaps, suggestions or things further to think about. The available space that we have, you might want to consider how you would divide the archives to store in different places. We've talked about heat and cold, but one of the problems is humidity. For some of the collection is not all the same, and different things will be needed. It's probably much more complex than just moving at one location with a concrete floor or wherever. The next thing is, I have to say I'm really pleased to see the community action and the care. And I have been interviewed separately by people in your organization about this. And personally, I'm willing to support it, not just as a counselor. But looking at some of the other projects I've been involved in, you just can't fix it once and leave it. There would have to be some concept of developing a trust fund, because as you point out many times, it's a 150-year-old building. Many things will go wrong, even after the first line fix. Opening day, cut the ribbon, everyone goes in and has tea, cake, and medals from the Governor General or whoever. The fact is, things will get wobbly. Things will get or the mayor, or things will get wobbly as you go along.
Way better.
You know,
Oh,
Okay,
absolutely.
so-
And this is the thing. You're absolutely right. And I think that's the sad part of this, the history of this building is that it was lovingly restored and then time marches on, as we all know. And if it's not maintained, I mean, this house that I live in was not maintained for a couple of years because the owner was not well. And in that short amount of time, you know, there's damage to the eaves troughs, there's damage to the water running down the side of the building, there's water getting in the basement, there's something cracking in the stone. So we know that these buildings, they have to be kept up. But it's surprising how sturdy they are and how long they will last. They're going to outlast any building in our township. I can guarantee you that. They will be there for another, if they're looked after, they will be there for another 50 years. They'll have a 200th anniversary if they're maintained properly. They were built by people who knew what they were doing. They're an example that young people will not see again. I mean, the things that the structural way that they were built, it's a history lesson in itself. Just looking at the way they're constructed. But I feel that you're absolutely right. There just has to be a plan. And one might consider that the township and the umbrella group or the agencies involved, let's say the Historical Society and the Friends of Springfield House were to be involved. Any capital projects such as replacing the heating system or fixing the roof would be a fundraising event taken over by the groups involved. The actual things like plowing out the driveway or making sure that the electricity's on, the basic maintenance could be maintained by the township. And anything that would need to be extra to make the buildings up to standard would be a fundraising initiative. But I think that the idea of just losing the buildings as a public space by the township is a shame, because I think it's an opportunity to have two buildings that are an asset that can be used for generations, and just to lose them because there's a little bit of this cost. Everything has costs, and I know that it sounds flippant. I'm not thinking about what's going on in the world, all over the world. Everybody's going through this, but you have to look at the big picture. These buildings have been around that long. The situation for Springfield House started when it started to lose its, I guess, support or its place in our township happened years ago, before you guys were even elected. So it's not an issue that is just in the last few weeks. It's been going on for a long time. So the lack of support or maintenance was an ongoing issue that I do not feel that anyone here has any responsibility for. However, it's that the potential is there. They're probably, of the two buildings, Springfield House is the most, I'd say, maybe the one that can be brought up to standards the quickest. In fact, it was used as a library up until I was going there to the library in 2016. I mean, it wasn't it has its issues, but it was used. It doesn't have everything it needs to have to be code, but I think with the right people working with us, we could get it up to code and respect the heritage nature of the structures.
Councillor Foti?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Birch. Thank you for the presentation. I want to thank all those members of our municipality for the emails, phone calls, letters. Like Councillor Grell had stated, my heart's in this project. As a member of council, I can reflect to what the deputy mayor has stated. Financially, we have a responsibility. Councillor Grell touched on a number of subjects that I don't need to repeat, but I will say this: you need to get a focus group sooner than later. This needs to be expedited. If you're serious about saving Springfield House, then quite frankly, you need to get serious. And do you know, you had touched on the fact that in 2016, the previous council had talked about $500,000. Do you know why that didn't move forward? Was it not enough, or do you know the answer?
I don't have any information on that at the moment, but I know that I have it in my notes somewhere. It was in the 2016 financial report.
Okay,
I believe.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is exactly, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that sounds about right. then, I think that would have been the correct amount. But now we're in 2021, so things have gone up.
And now we have
And
the,
of course,
now we have the perfect storm where the township doesn't have the revenue coming in, but we have the expense coming forward. This
Yeah,
is exactly
absolutely.
why we're implementing the asset management program through the head of our finance department and all our department heads, because someday this will take care of itself, but it's not an immediate process that's going to rectify itself for this case. Your presentation, I couldn't help but notice it stated right in there, this value is incalculable. I fully agree it is. I don't think we have any idea how much money it may take to do this. It's going to be extensive, but I think the hope is that the amount of activity that excuse me, the amount of activity that the subject matter generated is encouraging. It should be encouraging to those who want to form a committee.
I
And
hope
with
so.
that, I will leave my comments.
Thank you, Councillor.
I want to reiterate that time is not on your side. We have to deal with the realities, as Deputy Mayor stated. And if anything is done, then it has to come up to standards on a number of issues. Thank you.
So I'm going to have to end the discussion on the delegation because we have gone over 45 minutes just on the delegation. And I'd like to get to the staff report so that we can have a more robust discussion via the council and then take questions from the public. And I know there's a number of people in attendance this evening who potentially might want to ask questions. So unless there's any other burning questions for the presenter, I will thank him and send him on his way before we go into the regular council meeting agenda. Okay, thank you, Mr. Birch, and we thank you for your information and we thank you for your
Thank you.
enthusiasm and your passion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so next on the agenda is staff reports, SR-022-21 operations report, Springfield House and Escott Hall, moved by Councillor Jameson and seconded by Councillor Maybe, that the committee of the whole recommends that council close the Springfield House and Escott Hall to public access based on the results of the Escott Hall and Springfield House Building Condition Assessment, Appendix A, and the Building Condition Assessment from the Chief Building Official, the CBO, Appendix B, and the Fire Inspection Report from the Fire Prevention Officer, Appendix C, attached to Staff Report SR-022-21, and that the committee of the whole recommends that council authorize staff to work with the relevant stakeholders to select an alternative location for the archives on a temporary or permanent basis, and that the committee of the whole recommends that council direct staff to initiate the process for consideration of declaring the property surplus, which will include public notification and consultation on possible options for the property. So I will entertain discussion from council members in regards to this motion that's now on the floor. Councillor Gorell.
Thank you. And through your worship, one of the things that came up is just the simple definition of surplus when a township declares something surplus. And if we could have the planner address that and making sure that this township does indeed have a regulation or a policy as required under the Municipal Act, and what it means precisely when we would declare something surplus. Thank you.
I believe that would be the director of operations because he's in charge of facilities, correct? To declaring, it doesn't matter to me who answers the question, whoever wants to jump up first.
Thank you, through your worship. The township does have a bylaw that speaks to disposal of real property. So there's a process that goes along with that. In accordance with the Municipal Act, there's a requirement to advertise in the newspaper for a certain number of weeks. There's a requirement to hold a public meeting at which members of the public can bring their opinions forward to council for consideration in terms of what to do with the property. When a property is declared surplus, there's options. And reading the staff report and the recommendations, obviously some of that would come through some of the working group if council is supportive of the motion that's in front of them. But it would range from whatever options may come forward for council consideration through the public meeting process. Alternatively, it could mean that council says we're declaring the property surplus and let's market it. So there's a range of options that could come through that process, but what the process does is it brings forward the public to speak to council to understand what might be out there. It also allows staff to bring forward the detailed reports in terms of the condition assessment of the building and what the recommendations are from a technical perspective.
Thank you very much. So,
Councillor Jameson, and then I'll take Councillor Maybe, please.
so Your Worship, I think I'm hearing the planners say that the simple declaration of it being surplus allows us the flexibility to start to consider a whole bunch of options before, there's a decision made, which gives me a higher level of comfort than doing something tonight that, the hammer comes down. So is that fair?
So I'll let the planner follow up because obviously there's something further she'd like to add.
Just for clarification, if a property is in fact declared surplus, as I said, that could mean that it's surplus to the township's needs and it's put on the market. But what I'm saying is that it doesn't all have to happen in one meeting. It's a process. So there's advertisements, there's public meetings. As the recommendation is in front of council, there's working groups. So there's input for council consideration. So while starting the process, it starts that discussion, it doesn't necessarily end in the end result that it's surplus and it's being sold. There may be other information that comes forward through that review process for council consideration that determines what happens with the property.
Madam Planner, can I ask you to stand there for 2 seconds? And I'm just going to ask for further clarification because I know that there's a number of people on this call this evening that were very upset because they were under the impression that tonight's meeting, we would be making a decision of possibly one of the options in the report was to level the property. The property is designated, that was option 3, I think, in the report. It was put there as an option because it is an option. But having said that, the process, as the planner has just indicated, is pretty onerous to get to that point. Those buildings have been declared the heritage buildings, which would mean a long drawn out process here at the council table to have them unregistered. But really what the process tonight is to find whatever middle ground is possible, but also to start the process with the community group if necessary, if that's the will of council. But I just wanted to make that clarity, clarify that position, because there's a number of people who thought that the decision could be made this evening to surplus the property and flatten the buildings. And I want to make it very clear that that can't happen tonight. Also, this is committee of the whole. No decisions are being made this evening. Committee of the whole means that we're discussing these things and it will come back to council for further discussion and for ratification if need be. So I'm going to go to Councillor Maybe and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I have several questions I've had. Again, as I stated earlier, this is more down my realm of life than probably anything else. And I did talk about the storage garage being used, but I also thought of, what about the old Escott school right across the road? Does it have available space to use temporarily too, as another option? Just throw it out there as an option. It's a bigger project. One of the things I will say, if this went to open market for both these buildings and the property to be remediated, because we are going to find contaminant soil. One, it was a garage, so there's oil in the ground. 2, there's salt on the roadway, which is also contaminated soil. I run into this a lot and I've spent millions of dollars getting rid of it. I'll tell you that. So I estimate on open market, this would be a 2.5 mil to get these buildings back up to a standard, because it's going to be a very, very hefty price. Now, having said that, grants, people coming in and doing some of the work free of charge. There's a lot of ways of making it happen. But one of the other things that I really seen in the pictures was the actual foundation. The stone building back in that day was built on piled rock and on virgin soil first. Then mortar was added in and then you built up. So it doesn't have any footings in it. So that's one of the big things. You have a crack from the foundation right to the roof line. So that's going to have to be solved. Why is that happening? Is it on virgin rock? Is it on soil? So there needs to be a bigger study done, archaeological, architectural, heritage, to actually determine what's there. And then when you get into restoring historic windows, you can be $10,000 a window. because they may want that one restored, and that means rebuilt, and that's pretty extensive depending on the type. Then you get into the new codes, and when you start adding that into an older building, then you do escalate the cost quite a bit because of we know it's a beam, post and beam kind of structure for the house, and most of the wood members in the basement, when we went on our tour a couple of years ago, were not in great conditions then, mainly because of the water infiltration to the basement, which has increased the deterioration of the structure. So, and as you go up through, and with the loading of the library that was presently there, and the crushing of the beams because they've dry rotted or insect infiltration, you've got compression. So those have to be changed out. So you've got a whole floor level you've got to redo, and that will travel up all the way through the building. So as I say, this could escalate very easily into a large project. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that is probably where it is. Now, the building's probably had some Band-Aids put on it over the time and been okay. But if the group really wants to go into this, these are the standards they're going to have to meet. The foundation's got to be met, waterproofed, so the water stops, then rebuild as you go up. And each building has its own characteristics, one being a brick, one being a stone. So, and then you get into the bathrooms, which was also part of this, having more bathrooms. So you're going to have a new tile bed. There's a $50,000 hit. You know, by the time you get the plumbing, brand new wiring, brand new roofing. This is going to be a big project, and I don't think the estimate is actually accurate. So I think we do need to have a more accurate look at this, at both buildings and the site, test wells to actually get what contaminants are there, so that we have a better idea of what we can put forward and whether this working group really wants to go into this. So we have to kind of be a little careful on how we make this all work. But I'm for it. I want to keep the heritage buildings. As I've said, I have hundreds of thousands of square foot of heritage buildings I look after now. So we need to maintain our heritage, but there's a cost, and we need to see how we're going to manage that cost and make it manageable for the residents of the township. And it's doable, but there's a cost. Thank you.
Councillor Jameson,
Yeah.
I'll go back to you, and then I'll identify Deputy Mayor Lackey.
Yeah, just keep it very short. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts here. And if we get to the point where we consider the surplus option, from my point of view, I'm hearing, and Councillor maybe had a whole list of items that would have to go into that hopper. I'm hearing that's when we begin the conversation for real for the first time in years. And I think that's the point of trying to getting through this meeting and the next meeting so we can get to the conversation on all these details. There's a bunch of moving parts we can't respond to, except we do have in our face health and safety issues with respect to people using the current buildings for archive use and so on, which is something that is actually the responsibility of the library. With respect to the MOU that the library signed with the groups, it says that the library is responsible for the archives. And there's been no discussion of the library board that I know of about those challenges in the last 2 years. So that's something that the Friends of Springfield House, the archives are a separate issue that we're going to have to work through. So I'm concerned about addressing the health and safety issues, protecting the materials. I think those are the immediate things. And the other conversations about what happens with the buildings and everything else, that's part of trying to get into a culture of innovation, if you will, going down the road with these buildings. Sorry, that's enough.
Deputy Mayor, I'll recognize you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I entirely agree with Councillor Jameson on all his points. One of the other things was mentioned, it is zone heritage. So regardless of what happens to that building, whether we sell it, whether we don't sell it, that remains. There's always people out there who, want to rejuvenate these projects, whatever. Whoever buys it, if we decide to sell it, which we don't have to right now, it's still, there's only certain things they can do with that building. You know, if they fix it, it has to come through our department and they'll be told what they can and can't do because of the heritage designation. On another note, I used to own one of the oldest buildings in Lansdowne. It was Brayhead School, 1872. I didn't even have it listed on the market, and somebody wanted to buy it. So, you know, it was an old stone building. I don't know what they're going to do with it. I know they're not going to tear it down, but you know, it's just one of those things.
Okay, so did I see further hands up in regards to this? Oh, sorry. Director of Operations, Mr. Halliday.
Okay. I just wanted to add, Councillor maybe talked about the further investigation before we invested more money. We have put out a competition or an RFP for building condition assessment, and these facilities were included in it. So we were taking the next steps anyways to have a look at them and get that information on the condition from somebody that does this on a regular basis. So we'll have that additional information on the electrical and the plumbing and the foundation, roofing and all that type of stuff.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Director Halliday. Is there a time frame for that investigation or particularly this buildings to be reported on?
The timeline for this RFP, the completion of the contract is in line with the budget for 2022. So every consultant that submitted they had to have a completion date of October 15th, which would give us sufficient time to budget for 2022.
So the report would be coming forward for consideration along with the budget for 2022.
That's correct.
Okay, so the other thing I put down here was to postpone this for now because I think we're in too much limbo to know where we're actually going with it.
So, well, there's a motion on the floor. If you're asking to defer, I think that before we go any further, there's some comments that I'd like to make.
Yeah.
I had the privilege of going into these buildings today. I wanted to see where we were at since the last time we were there. It's very disheartening hearing the presenter this evening talk about $500,000 that should have been allocated or was to be allocated 6 years ago. And I obviously I can't substantiate that right now, and I'm not saying it isn't true, but I know that the conditions of the building are what they are today because that everybody has sort of pushed this around and pushed it to the side. And unfortunately, I would take an old house over a new house any day of the week. I've said that to a number of people. I do believe in heritage preservation, but I am very concerned that these buildings have been left too long. While I'm not ready to put the for sale sign up on them, I'm certainly not ready to put a bulldozer through them by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that I like the presenter's request to have a second opinion. I don't know if that's on the taxpayer dime or the group's dime to ask for that heritage architectural assessment. And I don't know if there is a specific request for that. And that's something maybe the group wants to have done. I know that the condition assessment that has been attached to your report this evening is from 2018. The report was an internal document that was not presented for a number of reasons, which I can only guess way long ago. But between our senior management team, the new director and the CAO and the whole senior management team, this can't be pushed aside any longer. So while I appreciate the talk of deferral, I think my concern is that almost, I believe it was you that brought it up, Councillor Grell, there needs to be a timeline on this. Like if we're going to move forward or not move forward with anything, we can't just keep kicking the can down the road. We need the condition assessment, which we know has to come to fruition by October 15th. I'm not saying we wait that long, but if I don't imagine that the costs associated with bringing the building up to code and the standards that are expected for municipal buildings are going to change, although the heritage assessment might change it slightly. But keep in mind, those costs that are in that report were from 2018. Those have gone up. And my major concern is that once you start peeling back the layers and you start picking at one thing or another, even the presenter said, you know, this building was lovingly restored back in 1980, whatever. And then everybody cut the ribbon and walked away and said, okay. And this is a project that will forever require funds. So if we are going to consider keeping the buildings over the long term, I know that with the treasurer's asset management plan, it's much more likely that it would be budgeted for over time. But today's cost is just a drop in the bucket over the long term. So I want to make sure that that's on record, that we're looking at this now and forevermore if we're keeping the buildings. So the motion that is on the floor this evening is to authorize staff to work with the relevant stakeholders and to deal with the archives, temporary or permanent. And then, so actually I'll just read it out again in its entirety. Oh, sorry. Yes. I'll recognize Deputy Mayor Lackey, and then we do have a question, and then I'll go to the participants, the attendees, to see if anybody has a comment to make. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe at one point within the last 10 years, that property was actually for sale and pretty much sold. Best of my knowledge. The other thing is, I think we're looking at option 2, which kind of leaves our options open, which is what you're discussing.
Yes, option 2 being that we further consult with relevant stakeholders. But Councillor Olkey, you had your hand up.
Yes, Your Worship, and thank you through you. I remember going through older documents in 2017 budget. They were looking at selling it for $400,000. The 2018 budget had disappeared.
That's the difficulty. Some of the records were hit and miss at that point. So we're in the bit of the dark. We can't go back. Unfortunately, the details there was not concrete decision made based on the minutes that we've reviewed. I will go to the questions. I'll ask the clerk to see whose hands are raised in the first question. So Ms. Gaylord, it says some of the costs in the report are not needed. The windows have been fixed and are historic, not to be replaced. The floor and beam joists have already had secondary steel beams right beside them. I believe the director and I were in the building today, and yes, there are some additional supports that were given or put in place to support the floor, and that's in the Escott Municipal building. But when I touched the beams that were still considered load bearing, they pretty much disintegrated. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but that is worrisome when you're having public people in there. Go ahead, Director.
I can confirm that the beams have been replaced, but the floor joists, half of the floor joists are rotten. That are resting on top of the newly replaced beams.
Thank you. So could we move a list of questions to the working group, including a second inspection by a company who's experienced in historical inspections? So could we move a list of questions to the working group? So I don't know if we can she interact? Ms. Olivier? So also working group, please be consulted regarding moving of the archives. So yeah, of course. So Ms. Olivier, Mrs. Olivier, as I've always known her because she was a principal when I went to school. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble there. Essentially, the archives will be discussed for moving. They have to be discussed with the library board. It's in the part of the MOU. We're trying to get back on track with doing things according to proper procedure for these things. So we would definitely be consulting with the group, with the Historical Society, but to further identify that the building's current condition, I believe, is preventing us from continuing to have it used in a public manner. And even though it's only the Historical Society in general that are using it, there's still a safety issue there, and that is the utmost concern. So yes, the answer is yes, that it will be in conjunction with the group. As far as a list of questions to the working group, I'm sure that based on tonight's council meeting and the questions that have been posed by the councillors, that will hopefully provide the questions that the group can come back and answer at a later date, along with staff members. So I have another question, Mr. Palmer, page 57, the township document refers to a $500,000 investment in Springfield House. Ironically, it's framed as a 5-year plan, which will come to fruition this year. So, okay, thank you, Mr. Palmer. Do you want to open that up? Can you? Not that we're going to read through everything tonight, but thank you for adding that link, Mr. Palmer. So 5 years, and that's the irony of all of this. Had that 500,000 been spent over that time, 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, we'd be having a different discussion. So that will be brought forward for review with the team. Are you aware of the standard method of remediating joists that are affected by powder post beetles to sister the original ones with new pressure treated joists and damaged ones that are not load bearing? I think we're getting down a bit of a rabbit hole about opinions on what building code and what is official and what isn't. Our CBO has gone through the building and given his opinion. It is in the report. We're not here to debate building code or what is proper and what isn't. I am interested to hear about a historical assessment. I've never heard of that. I'm sure there are specialists in that particular realm, but I have to think that the original assessment that was done in 2018 was done by engineers who engineer buildings, period, and make sure that they're safe one way or the other. Whether we need to have wider doors or elevators, that could be up for discussion with a historical building. And I don't know what the rules and regulations are on that, but that can be discussed further as well. So, so I will recognize Mr. Bickerton at this point. Go ahead, Mr. Bickerton. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Thank you.
There we
Can
go.
you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm very much a heritage buff myself, as many are in the township and other places. It's a shame to see a building, and there aren't very many of them in Leeds and the Thousand Islands, that's just left to go. And if I may chastise the former councils and possibly, this is a stitch in time situation. I remember when we had the same thing happen in Gananoque with the town hall, and there was a library in it. There was heritage in it. There was a lot of pieces of things that were from the original building. The town was ready to take it down and build a new building, they said, just like the new Toronto Dominion Bank. And they would destroy the downtown hall in Gananoque. Ron McFarland stepped in, and some of you will remember Ron, the lawyer in town. He asked me to be on the committee as an engineer. We put together funds, and it didn't cost the town a dime to make that town hall into
you got a deal
building.
You're hired.
No, I can't do it again. I haven't got enough time. But This is a situation that the former councils, I think, should take a little bit on their knuckles on this, because it's a stitch in time situation. And now we've got to pay 9 to get ourselves out of this box. You can't let this building just keep going to rack and ruin, or it'll fall down all by itself. And then you don't have a choice on it. At this point, at least you do have a choice. I happened to change careers in 1991 or 1972 and became from an engineer to a real estate broker. One of the relatively new or first listings that I took, I think about 1979 or 80, was that town hall, that Springfield building. I believe it was a former hotel. I think I sold it to somebody in private, and then it went to the township later. But it wasn't in really good shape at the time I got it for a listing. He was prepared to do quite a bit of work on it, and I guess he did it. Certainly any steel beams that weren't there when I was in. And if we're going to save it, we've got to pony up and get at it. Now, also, I understand from our own mayor, Mayor Loico in Gananoque, that in all probability, there will be a lot of public funds available for things like restoration of buildings and parks and that sort of thing. He used to work, before he became our mayor, he used to work for the Ontario government. And he said, that's the kind of thing they have to do to get the economy back up and running. And so there's going to be, according to Mayor Loico, some money available somewhere in the system. It'll either be federal or provincial. Now, don't feel you're all alone. The federal government's got exactly the same problem with Rideau Hall and exactly the same problem with the Prime Minister's residence. Just happens they're quite a bit bigger than the Springfield house. But we have to do something. And that's pretty much what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bickerton. Okay, are there any further questions, Madam Clerk? And then I'm going to have to put this to bed as well, because we have a heavy agenda after this as well.
More written.
Consider a working relationship with the Friends of Springfield House Commons similar to that successful operational. So the question is, would council consider a working relationship with the Friends of Springfield House similar to the very successful operational relationship with the Friends of Rockport Customs? Customs has been able to manage remediation and development work on the properly through tremendous fundraising and work in kind while avoiding the pitfalls of government procurement methods. I believe that this council would be more than happy to entertain anything of that nature to move this project forward. But I would have to say that it needs, as Mr. Bickerton has just indicated, this is a timely thing and it needs to move forward sooner rather than later. The only concern that I would have personally is the ability to fundraise in a COVID situation right now. But please recognize the working group has only had the report for 3 to 4 days. Very little time to reflect and make plans in cooperation with the township. Absolutely. So as it was stated earlier, the decision is not being made this evening to do anything specific, but rather look at options along with community groups that are being affected along with this. Councillor Gorell, and then I'm going to call the question.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to bring people's attention to the conclusion of the report. I think that it wraps it up pretty nicely, what we're actually dealing with tonight. And I'd like to get back to that, the mention of the concept of declaring something surplus. It says engaging the process does not bind council into having to declare the property surplus, as council retains the power to determine a different course in respect of the property. So what is being looked at here is very reasonable. Option 2, we're going to be voting on this shortly, or pardon me,
We're voting on this tonight, but it'll still come back to council.
Correct.
If there's further information that comes forward between
Correct.
now and then, it will be.
So I'd like the public, and I'd like the public to understand that this is not, they may be in the impression that this is overly binding. It is not, in my impression, and I stand corrected. if I am wrong in saying that. Thank you.
I believe that we got a thumbs up from the CAO, so that is exactly how it's to be understood. Thank you, Mr. Burrell. Councillor Foti, and then I am going to call the question.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just pleased to see with the community and this table, I've never seen this much engagement since we've been elected. Thumbs up to everybody. With reference to Mr. Bickerton and a few others that have commented on the 2018 report, might I remind everybody that was election year? And seeing the activity taking place on this one subject, there's like a real good reason it didn't rear its head in 2018. Having said that, this building complex belongs to this township. I think we could take the high road and organize the first meeting to bring all the stakeholders together to try and move this forward with the committee. I think it's up to us as a council to hold that meeting and hold it soon. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll read the motion one last time before we vote on it. Moved by Councillor Jameson, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council close the Springfield House and Escott Hall to public access based on the results of this Escott Hall and Springfield House Building Condition Assessment Appendix A and the Building Condition Assessment from the Chief Building Official, the CBO Appendix B, and that the Fire Inspection Report from Fire Prevention Officer Appendix C attached to Staff Report SR 022-21, and that Committee of the Whole recommend that Council authorize staff to work with relevant stakeholders to select an alternative location for the archives on a temporary or permanent basis, and that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council direct staff to initiate the process for consideration of declaring the property surplus, which will include public notification and consultation on possible options for the property. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried unanimously. So we look forward to working with the community groups that have presented themselves, and thank you to each and every one of you who joined us this evening on this particular matter. Please feel free to stay for the rest of the agenda. I might actually call a quick recess to refresh yourselves so that we can get back at it. So you've got 6 minutes. We will get back to business here at 8:01. Moving along, we had a hand up at the last minute. We'll just double check and make sure that it isn't. I think it was Mr. Craig. Mr. Craig, was there something that you needed to say before we move on with our agenda? We'll just ask you to unmute. Maybe it was an accident. Mr. Craig, if you do have comments for us in regards to Springfield House or the Rock or the Escott complex, please make sure that you forward it to the clerk and she'll make sure that it gets forwarded to the appropriate individuals who are handling this file. Okay, so moving along with SR-02321 Finance Report Municipal Modernization Funding. And the motion is put on the floor by Councillor Fody and seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approve the allocation of $42,332 of municipal modernization funding from the working fund reserve for the Public Sector Digest PSD contract to develop a compliant asset management plan. That the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approve the allocation of $20,000 of municipal modernization funding from the working fund reserve for the purchase of mobile devices. And that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approve the transfer of the balance of the municipal modernization funding of approximately $130,170 from the working fund reserve to the special projects reserve fund for future modernization related projects. Discussion on this motion. Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Olkey and then Councillor Grau. Oh, sorry. I'll strike Councillor Olkey. We'll go straight to Councillor Grau. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, once we transfer these funds, who is in charge of the discretionary spending? Once they go into
Treasurer's
special.
Treasurer is coming to answer that question.
Through Your Worship. So the reason for proposing to move them from the working fund reserve to the special projects reserve fund is because the intention of those funds is to work on special projects, which we'd still have to come back through council to get approval to pull the money out of that reserve fund, but it aligns better with what the intent of the reserve fund is. The working fund reserve is where we put money if we have a surplus at the end of the year. It's intended to try to give us a bit of buffer and cash flow in terms of our bank account, but it's not really intended to hold money that might be used for the type of purpose that the modernization was intended for. It really aligns better with the special projects.
And through you, I understand if we don't do something, a movement, we may lose it.
Through Your Worship, I haven't heard anything official, but I think with the more recent announcement of application-based modernization funding round, we're thinking that it would be probably prudent for the township to be spending the money that we received in 2019 before we started to try to apply for additional funding when we actually hadn't spent the original amount that was provided. That's nothing official that I've seen, but that's kind of some of the thought process behind the report.
Thank you. And through you, Your Worship, and to the treasurer, regarding the $20,000 ask for mobile devices, can you flesh that out? What type of devices? How many devices? Does it go to an RFQ? And lastly, and this might be a question for the clerk, in my previous employment, having dealt with mobile devices, we were required initially by Transport Canada and then after that by our company to limit the apps that we put on the company so that there was no social media, no Facebook, no personal emails, all that business, because the security of our township would be very much at risk. So A, do we have a policy to take care of that when this is given? And would all the employees be cognizant of the fact that they have to be aware of that? Thank you very much.
Through Your Worship. So I believe there are about 13 devices that we were looking at purchasing. I'm not sure if I have the exact numbers because I was told rough numbers by planning, operations, and fire services. So I think fire services is looking for 6. The planning department was looking for 3. And then operations is looking for the remaining number. But so we're looking I think fire is looking for some of the reporting that they already have to do through some of the software that they're already using, but be able to do it real time in the field. I think during incidents or fire events. And as we roll out citywide this year, we're looking at being able to have staff also update it through citywide, the asset management program, to be able to update on the fly, like in real time again. So if a supervisor is driving down the road, they can actually just go onto the tablet and create a service request or work order right on the fly. The other thing is there's a small amount, like we don't actually have a price yet because we need to get quotes. Depending again on the amount, we'd have to either get quotes or an RFQ. I think in this case, it would just be several quotes from different vendors to make sure we get the best price. And then we also may have to upgrade a few of our phones because the latest version of citywide software, the app on the phone, doesn't work on some of our older phones. So again, just a small cost there. But if there's room in this $20,000, that might be required to do that as well. Sorry, and I didn't answer your second part though. Yeah, on the policy. So there is and the clerk can also speak to this because she wrote the policy, but there's an information security policy, and we do currently follow the policy as it relates to the township phones, and do monitor the phone bills and try to keep track of what appears to be possible personal use of data or other costs that might be incurred on the phones, and that everybody is to sign a form when they receive a phone and when they review this policy, which does include a section talking about the fact that no app can be downloaded without the permission of the township, and it's to be used for business purposes. And it kind of goes through several of that aspects.
Thank you very much.
Further questions in regards to the motion at hand? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried. Thank you very much. Next motion that's coming to the floor, moved by Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Burrell. The committee of the whole recommends that council approve a transfer of $200,000 from the 2020 operating budget to the tax stabilization reserve fund. And the committee of the whole recommends that council carry forward funding approval of $25,000 from the modernization funding in the working fund reserve to fund the broadband business plan in 2021. Madam Treasurer, if you'd like to speak to that.
Through your worship. So the $25,000 of modernization money has already been approved by council. It was approved in 2020. This is kind of a formality just to ensure that that approval carries forward into 2021 because the funds have not been spent yet. So the money, that money hasn't been withdrawn from the reserve fund. It's still sitting there waiting to be matched up with that project. So just to get council approval that we can carry that forward. On the other transfer, we're looking to try to make sure that we have money set aside for the potential casino property tax assessment appeal that's currently underway. I honestly have no idea how long that appeal might take. It's been ongoing since 2017, before I came here. And so we have an estimate that we believe to be roughly around $400,000 in tax write-offs that would relate to 2016 to 2020. What we're trying to do is set up enough money in that reserve fund. So when that write-off happens, whether it happens in 2021, 2022, whenever it happens, we don't take a hit in that year to the operating budget because we now have to realize this write-off for these taxes. So
can I also add something to your comment, Madam Treasurer? Our neighbors to the west have $468,000 in the same tax rate stabilization fund or reserve fund for the same purpose. We had not been funding it. I believe the first year that we were here in the 2019 budget, I believe Treasurer Nigel White had recommended we put away $90,000, which we did. But that was the beginning of the savings for this. So while I can appreciate that the taxpayers at large might not quite understand why this is such a large lump sum right now, it's because of the hard work that every staff member did last year during a pandemic to make sure that our spending was in check. And this is the results of that. And we still have to deal with this cost that is coming down the pipe when that is. So turning a blind eye to it is really not an option, in my opinion. And I doubt it will be the opinion of this council, although I'll wait till the vote. But I just wanted to draw the parallel that our neighbors who get the same amount of money as us in taxation have put away this amount of money. It's a significant amount of money and would equate to a very large tax increase if we did not have said funds in reserve. Councillor Foti and then Councillor Garrell.
Just a comment / question, your worship, through you. Our councillors to the west, did they start in 19?
I believe they started right as soon as the appeal was made. I believe that it was going on from the moment the appeal was made.
Right. And because that's with MPAC and
we have no control over it.
That too, but in the fact that MPAC has been basically shut down, as a lot of other government entities have been last year. So
they're still operating, but they're operating on a limited basis. So this has not been finalized yet, this particular matter.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Garrell.
Thank you, your worship. I think it's interesting for the public to understand that our current value assessment was down by $19 million in large part because of this casino ongoing appeal. And if my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but MPAC came up with a number of $59 million for the casino as an asset value, but that is only, they had to give the township something on which to provide taxes. This is not yet carved in stone. It could be lower, it could be a little higher. But the township, where many townships increase their current value assessment, which helps reduce the tax base, this township took a hit of $19 million, which is significant. In fact, I worked it out. I think it's about, it'll be over $85,000 because it would be a special casino rate, which is 18 pages long and very difficult to get through. However, the public, this is the first time this year that we had been, or I'd been presented with these numbers, and I just want the public to understand how significant that is. And that's why $200,000 in any surplus should go to funding the potential write-off here, which is significant, $408,000 as we're looking at it. Thank you.
Through your worship, just yes, you're correct, Councillor Rowell. So MPAC, the decision has not been made on the appeal, but MPAC feels that this is a more reflective estimate, I guess, of where we may end up. And so instead of levying taxes on 87 million, and then we just have to write off that much money again, right? So yes, it's not a final value, but it is a better estimate. The other comment I just wanted to make is just to clarify, we're still working through the year-end entries. We have the auditors starting next week, so there's still potential for additional entries to come through, and that's why I really haven't commented on where we are at with the 2020 surplus deficit. I'm afraid to even speculate yet because you never know what the auditors may find things that I've missed, but definitely I think it's prudent and fiscally responsible that we try to set this money aside while we can. If we end up in a deficit in 2020, I'll be coming back to council and explaining why we're in a deficit, and this may contribute to it. But then I think we look at where we pull the money from to then fund the deficit, and that might be the working fund reserve or somewhere else. I think it's important that the money sits in this reserve fund for this specific purpose, because we know that this is definitely a risk that we're going to be looking at.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Councillor Maybe, and then I'll call the question.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Just on a smaller amount, the 25,000 for the modernization of the broadband. I can't recall why that hasn't been spent yet. Is there something going on?
This is additional funds, is it not? Or
through your worship, I think that there was a procurement process that took place the last quarter of 2020. So the work is just finishing up, I believe, the first quarter of this year. And that's why there's a bit of a delay, just a timing difference there as to when we could spend it.
Okay. So it's just a reallocation of the year rather than the amount. Okay. Any further questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried. Oh, sorry. I'm going to have the clerk just keep looking for me because I'm going to keep forgetting, and I apologize to the public. It's not that I don't want to take questions. I just know we have a large agenda to get through. So the next motion the next motion that's on the floor is moved by Councillor Foti and seconded by Councillor Olkey. That Committee of the Whole recommends that the council authorize staff to proceed with the acquisition of a 3/4 ton truck complete with snowplow and sander from Myers Automotive in the amount of $61,255.45 inclusive of the net HST. Any discussion, any questions on this particular piece of equipment for the director? One of the counselors just said to plow ahead. Ha ha ha. Anyway, so seeing no questions, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify. Thank you very much. None opposed, so the motion is carried. Okay. Next on the agenda, next motion is moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Foti. The Committee of the Whole recommends that Council award tender OPS-2021-003 dust suppressant 18 to 20% to road maintenance equipment and services, RMES, for $22,880.74, including net HST. The Committee of the Whole recommends that Council award tender OPS-2021-004 dust suppressant 30 to 35% to DALI Dust Control Limited. That's an interesting name. For $63,803.52, including net HST. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Just the one question of, was this one of the items that we were talking about amalgamating with somebody else potentially, or is this a standalone for us for the 2-year term?
Through Your Worship, this is a standalone for a 2-year term.
Any further questions? Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, going back to the name, have you had previous dealings with this company?
I personally have had dealings with RMES for the purchase of equipment, and I've had experience with DALI in terms of the calcium chloride as well.
Okay, the only reason I ask is I don't think they've ever had a contract with us before.
Oh, CAO, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, both companies are the incumbents. They provided the calcium treatments last year as well, so we have experience with them. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions in regards to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and the motion is carried. Next motion on the floor is moved by Councillor Foti, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that the Committee of the Whole recommends that the Council receive report SR-027-21 Lansdowne Residential Land Summary as information. Are there any questions or concerns in regards to this report? It's provided for information. Go ahead, Councillor Maybe, and then Councillor Foti.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, there is one development that we passed last year to go ahead. I'm just wondering, that's one of the areas listed on the map that is indicated, but there are some other areas which kind of look like they're part of something else. So, and I think Councillor Foti has more to say on that particular topic. And pending development. Just wondering about those potential areas. There seems to be some pockets here and there that are on the map too, but just wondering what.
I've just asked the clerk to put the map up so that we can. So it would be, this question would be for the planner. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the one. Is that the correct one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Or that one. Which one? The real-time one or the color map?
Probably the real-time one is a little better.
Okay, that's fine.
Go
Go ahead, Madam Planner.
I'm not sure what the question was.
Well, there is the one particular development that has been passed last year to actually start, but I see that there was a little delay on that one for some reason. But some of these areas, particularly there's a red zone here area proposed development to the west and east also, and then there's one called land holdings. So I'm just wondering what that might be. Is that our land holdings or is it somebody else's?
So through you, Your Worship, the property on Church Street, which was the subject to a zoning amendment last year, we are still moving ahead with a review of that application. So That will come forward to council when it's ready to be approved. We are working with the applicant on that one.
Okay.
With respect to this one, so the appendices to the report show the details of each. There's also a chart included in the report that describes the land areas associated with each of the potential development areas. What you see in front of you is actually, there was just we've got a plan of subdivision, 2 plans of subdivision that are in front of council right now. Comments have gone out to the applicant. So the dark shaded areas, the red shaded areas,
Yes.
are the areas that are subject to those applications for the Lansdowne mixed use development.
Okay.
The west side, the dark shaded area, is a commercial industrial proposal for a subdivision, and to the east is a residential land subdivision. The areas that are outlined just in the red heavy outline are other lands that are owned by the applicant but are not part of the current application in front of council.
Okay.
Because if you can see the dark blue hatched line,
Yes.
that's the settlement area boundary for Lansdowne. So that they're not proposing for residential development outside of the settlement area boundary.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation. Councillor Gorell, and then Councillor Fody.
Thank you. Just the, I guess we're calling it the Lansdowne East property. I see it listed as institutional. Is it connected in any way to the horticultural grounds? It's
You mean the agricultural? grant?
agricultural.
I was like, oh.
Yeah. Who, when it shows institutional, I find that.
That's us. We own it.
Oh,
We own
so
that?
that's the Jesse Street property that's adjacent to the parkland. Yes.
That's why it's zoned institutional, because we own it.
It's the one right across, well, it's our neighbor down here. Is that, am I looking at the correct property on the map, of colored map?
Oh, the colored map. Can you
Okay,
go to
you'll
that
see
one?
it in blue.
Here.
Top right, that property.
Top right is not ours. That's in behind the seniors building.
It shows institutional here, so.
Oh, sorry, that's the township building.
Yeah, that's
Area.
that's this
That's
property.
this
Oh, that
property.
is
We're
the
sitting on it.
township property.
I was like,
Well, there you go. Thank you.
so we'll go to Councillor Fody. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the planner. While we have that mapping up right there, the blue on the west side of Outlet Road and the yellow, does that not belong to the Agricultural Society? I was a little caught off guard when I saw this presentation because Lansdowne Agricultural Society owns that land. It's not up
But
for
I think
sale.
it's zoned, I think it's zoned institutional. And that's maybe, it's a zoning map.
Designated institutional in the official plan.
It's,
Okay, so the little yellow on the right, that's us, right? In the blue block?
no, it's
No,
the
The whole
house right
blue
here.
lot is the township office property. The little yellow is the residential lot directly to the north.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Thank you for that correction, because I was looking at that thinking we've just advertised half the fairgrounds for sale. And I'm sure that given COVID, they may entertain that idea, but it's not up for us to make that decision. While I have the microphone, if you will, Your Worship, I want to thank the staff. We asked for this report a couple of months ago. It's very extensive and complete, and I really appreciate it because now when prospective buyers or builders come forward, we actually have something to entertain them with. Thank you.
So, and just for clarification, for those who are listening, the red circles are the wellheads. So those are the protected areas. And I do believe that the planning department in the future will be having further discussions with council in regards to our lands around the Jesse Street property and where that might lead us as well. So this is a first step into maximizing the densification of Lansdowne as a whole. The piece of property that was sold under tax sale over a year ago is now back on the market, or it might not be listed right at this moment, but it was listed briefly in behind the seniors building for development. So our hope is that, well, my hope is that it'll eventually come back to the market. It's not still listed, and somebody will take that on as a project. As we heard here at council, we have a servicing study which says that we have capacity on the system here in the village. The best thing that could happen for this village is to have more users on the system to spread the costs around, but also for the village to be more dense with families and other individuals that want to come and live here and make the community that much more vibrant. We have a school, we have a grocery store, we have a bank machine, maybe not a bank, but a bank machine. We have a liquor store. We have a number of businesses that are looking to open up. So at the end of the day, this is all very good news for Lansdowne, I believe. Any further questions or inquiries in regards to the information report? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried. Okay, so next motion is moved by Councillor Grell, seconded by Councillor Oki. And that committee of the whole recommend that council approve the requesting zoning bylaw amendment attached as Exhibit G to staff report SR-028-21 to rezone the property located at 236 Ivy Lee Road to rural residential special exception 17 RR 17 zone to allow the property to be used to support residential use located at 251 Ivy Lee Road. Discussion on this. Oh, sorry, Councillor Maybe. I apologize.
Thank you, Worshipman, through you. The only thing that I can really say, and I've had a couple of members down in that area call me, it's that we do abide by the Property Standards Act, that the place doesn't look like a rundown, let's say. So that's the only thing that I really wish that we do try to make sure. Development, I've always preferred development, so it's good, just property standards.
Thank you. Further comment or questions in regards to the motion that's on the floor? Is there any questions from the gallery? No hands up. Okay. So seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried. Next motion is moved by Councillor Olkey, seconded by Councillor Gorell, that the committee of the whole recommend that council receives the annual building permit fee and expense report as information, and that it will be posted publicly on the TLTI website, and that the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the transfer of $1,323 from the building department reserve fund to fund the 2020 building department deficit. Any questions on this motion? And if that's not budgeting at its finest, I don't know what is. Within $1,000. Yeah. Councillor Jameson, did you have? Oh, okay. Seeing none, seeing no questions or comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried. Okay, so oh, I've got a bunch of updates. So next is unfinished business, or no? Oh, I apologize. Staff reports. I got myself ahead of myself. Okay, so I'll ask that Ms. Goodman come to the podium and discuss community and business services report, community safety and well-being plan, and then also the strategic plan timeline update. Go ahead, Ms. Goodman.
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to provide council with a couple of very brief updates. The first being on the community safety and well-being plan. Just as a reminder for council that this is a legislative requirement to complete the community safety and well-being plan. It was originally intended to be completed and submitted to the provincial government actually in July of 2020. However, owing to COVID, the process was deferred, with the new deadline being July 1st of 2021. The Leeds and Thousand Islands Township has partnered with the United Counties and the town of Prescott as one of all of the member municipalities to engage in the process. And I just wanted to notify council that a contract has been awarded to Big Thinking, and that the county will be leading the work. An advisory committee has been established. Mayor Jones and Mayor Peckford are co-chairs of the committee, with representation from the United Counties, OPP, police services, family services, medical clinics, health and wellness, and whatnot. They had their first meeting on February 18th. A community survey is being released if it hasn't been already, and I will ensure that you have the link for the survey in your weekly council update at the end of this week. And a partners meeting is scheduled to take place sometime in April. And again, as I have more information, I will make sure that it is available to you. The second update, of course, is on the strategic plan. So council may remember that I stood before you almost exactly a year ago today. We were quite excited to kick off our strategic planning process, but again, owing to COVID, the process was deferred. This was sort of in consultation with Strategy Corps, who has been retained to complete this work. The thought at that particular time was that everyone was very COVID focused. Staff's efforts were kind of redirected. And of course, our members of our community would have, I don't want to say speaking from a place of fear, but certainly speaking from a place of COVID. And we didn't really want that to derail what could be and what will be an incredibly important guiding document for this municipality. A project team internally was set up, including CIO Donachie, Director Vendetti, and myself, and we've had a preliminary kickoff meeting with representation from Strategy Corps. I want to use this opportunity to let council know that you will be receiving a phone call or an email, very likely coming from my desk, as we begin to set up one-on-one 30-minute appointments for you with the counselor. What we're asking you to do is put on your thinking cap, think about some of the building blocks in terms of what is going to build a safe, vibrant, healthy community for you. What are some of your strategic priorities? How do you think we're going to get there? How do you think that we could potentially measure these? Following this, and again, the goal is to have this completed through the month of March into April. If all goes well, we will be hosting a couple of workshops with the consultants, senior staff, and council that would lead into community consultation to take place in April. We do, of course, recognize that our seasonal residents may not be here to actively participate, or that people may not have access to broadband. And we are working with Strategy Corps to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to participate. So again, I know that that's really quick, but it's been a long evening. And again, I just wanted to make sure that these things were on your radar. I invite you to call and seek additional information at my desk at any time, but please know that additional information will be forthcoming as we kind of work through the processes with our consultants.
Thank you very much, Ms. Goodman. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councilor Brown.
Just a quick question, and thank you through you, Your Worship. Is the Economic Development Committee a part of the strategic plan and their timeline? Are they feeding into that as well?
Certainly, thank you. And through you, Your Worship, absolutely. Committees of council will be very keen to engage. Again, we're looking at organizations like Thousand Islands Association to speak on behalf of the river community and some of the educational campaigns. We would be looking to our village improvement groups and certainly our committees of council to provide input to the process.
So the consultant called, is it Strategy Corps?
Yes, sir.
So they'll be consulting with those groups? Is that
yes,
correct?
sir.
Okay.
As part of the community consultation phase scheduled to start in April.
I had the benefit of joining a senior management team on a meeting with this group. I have no doubt that we will get an excellent strategic plan that will be robust and well-rounded by community groups. I really did find that they were quite knowledgeable, engaged, and this is what they do day in and day out, and they know how to get the best information from the residents and so on. So I am really looking forward to this process, even though it's a bit weird, if for lack of a better word. You know, obviously it's much more fun to get into a room of people and to have those face-to-face dialogues and you know, to bat ideas back and forth. So it'll be a bit different, but nonetheless, I think after COVID, it's given us an appreciation for what is really important here and what we want to see going forward. So I look forward to that process. Thank you, Ms. Goodman. Is there any other questions in regards to that? Seeing none, I'll move on to unfinished business. Anybody have any unfinished business? Any other business? Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just some bit of update from the Conservation Authority. They've changed some appointments. I'll be staying on their partner groups with the source water protection, and they've also put me into Rideau corridor steering. Thank you.
Excellent. We appreciate your effort on that particular board to begin with. So, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and staying with the water theme. Any update from the IJC?
I know that GLAM, the Great Lakes Active Management Committee, if you will, is continuing to meet. I do believe that the IJC is still reviewing what new information is coming to light. I'm sure that most of you will have noticed that the water before the ice came in was quite low here, although it's still higher than the lowest low that we've had here. The Great Lakes in general are still at their highest point. So we will receive a huge amount of water in the spring. The good news is we got a bunch out in the fall, but that remains to be seen. I haven't seen any forecasts. Have you seen any, Councillor Grell, that have come across your desk? I haven't seen any.
I have seen some IJC things. I haven't read them in depth, to be honest. I did see one concern was I hope they don't go too low. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
So, and this is the interesting piece is that we could probably go too low and still receive lots of water. It's just the rate at which the water can come in as well. So go ahead, Councillor Grell.
Under just other business, just a note. I received an email from the chair of the St. Lawrence Economic Development Commission, and it was on the topic of the Line 5, Enbridge Line 5 situation that the state of Michigan is thinking of blocking that goes at the Mackinac Straits of Mackinac. And the concern was just how much Ontario and Quebec depend on that, and specifically Eastern Ontario. Propane, because it ships oil, and then of course it's refined into diesel, propane, you name it. And so the report that I read, again, chaired by the chair, was pretty significant. And I just want to make note that it would be their position that they would be lobbying the governments to sit down and make sure that Line 5 continues. And it's you can find Line 5 easily online, look it up, and it's an eye opener. So thank you very much.
Just to bookend that, there's a number of businesses at the Port of Johnstown that depend on that particular line in general, not to mention all the people along the way, but the Port of Johnstown would be decimated if that line was cut off. So Councillor Foti, and then.
Thank you, Your Worship. With regards to our regional health system, is there any notification comes through you at the county level as to how is the procurement process for
vaccines?
For the vaccines, thank you, coming down? Is it a sit and wait to see who's receiving? Is it a lobbying effort? Can you explain that at all?
So as I understand it, I've been part of a number of update calls, just that it's more of a hurry up and wait. Let's just put it this way. We're ready to vaccinate every single person that stood in line and probably could get it done very quickly. The vaccine procurement that happens at the federal level is what's causing the bottleneck. The way it's distributed is fairly and equitably. It is not one place that needs it more than another. It's based on groups of people. So the first responders and the frontline workers, as well as the long-term care residents, that has to be done. I know that paramedics in Leeds Grenville just got vaccinated this past week. So it's slowly trickling down the funnel. And the way the funnel is that the long-term care people, the first respond, and I know that there's a number of individuals that are, wanting to call the health unit to see where they fall in because they desperately want the vaccine. And I want to reassure the public that the local health unit is doing everything they can to roll that vaccine out. Unfortunately, they can't roll out what they don't have. And because the province is responsible for distributing it, so they can't distribute what they don't have. So they are rationing to make sure that the next people in line are getting done. And it is happening, but slowly. My understanding is the federal government has procured some more vaccines lately that are going to move us up to the April timeframe. So within a month, I think you'll see it ramp up. I think it's famous last words because we heard the same thing a couple months ago and then that fell through. So I don't want to be a pessimist. I really am hopeful that this will happen, but I believe that the new system is an online system where you can register that they will be rolling out, where you can call in or online log in, and that way you're notified when your group goes, you'll get an automatic notification. And so I think that's a voluntary thing that's rolling out here shortly, and you'll be getting more information about that. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could just say something on that, is that realistically, it was only past 2 months ago that the vaccines were even available to be used. So for the world to think that they could manufacture umpteen billion vaccines and put them in people's arms in 2 months is a little unrealistic already. So, be thankful that we're getting it when we're getting it, and that we have 4 now available to us in Canada and the US, and they are ramping up all the vaccines, and before too long, anybody who wants it will have it. So
thank you. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Just a comment. I'm very proud to say that my daughter's had both her doses. She's was very fortunate.
Your daughter works in long-term care.
Yes, as well as KGH.
Mm-hmm. We're glad that she does have her vaccine. Okay. Any other business? Seeing none, I'll move on to notices of motion. Any notices of motion? Councillor Jameson. Oh dear. We don't have time for the argument. Just get to it.
Today, we had the opportunity to visit some residents in Ward 2 to discuss the challenges they're facing with, well, just call them short-term rentals, but it's an Airbnb situation. And this has come up before. So the notice of motion that we would like to bring forward, I'm hoping that Councillor Olkey will join me in this, is that we direct staff to bring forward a report for council consideration that provides information regarding regulating short-term rentals, including approaches taken by other municipalities. This is going to take time. Residents who are really affected by this, of course, would like you to see something happen today, like a lot of things, but we need to go through this process to find out what we can do to try to ensure that there's some concerns about safety and noise and everything else going on. And I think it's time for us to take a look. So that's the point of the notice of motion that I'm prepared to move, and I'm looking for support.
Councillor Olkey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I couldn't have said it better myself, and I would second the motion.
We look forward to that notice of that motion coming forward.
I just ask.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. Which meeting did you want your notice of motion to be brought to be considered? The next committee of the whole meeting?
Presumably that's how it
April
works?
6th? Yep.
Okay.
Unless you deem it expedient and you want it on the council agenda. But generally it goes for public consumption first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
April 6th.
And you have the wording?
I think we'll work with the director of planning and
okay.
and you on that. Yep.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other notice of motion? Seeing none, I'll go forward with the mayor's update. I'll preface it by saying that the chief's last day here with the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands was yesterday. Today, it's unfortunate. Monday night is, and the general public may or may not know this, but Monday night is fire training night for all of our volunteer firefighters here in the municipality. And they chose to take an opportunity to do a drive-by. Mr. Chief Lackey. I'm thinking I promoted you. You're not the deputy mayor anymore, you're chief. Chief Lawson, who is now officially retired, is at home. And due to COVID, we are unable to celebrate and have a big party for him, which is very unfortunate, but we are looking forward to doing something in April. The deputy chief is here this evening, and they had a drive-by. So all the fire trucks, all the firemen, everyone drove by, and Chief Lawson was very touched, I understand, and very moved by the showing of our volunteers. I believe there was a gift that was presented to him on his front step. That's the weird thing about COVID, what saying thank you just isn't quite the same. But yet we know that Chief Lawson was very moved and he enjoyed every year and every moment he worked here with us in the township, whether it was paid or volunteered. So we thank him for his service. I know I've said it a number of times. We thank him for his leadership and his commitment to this community. And thank you to all the volunteer firefighters that made a point of showing up and showing their respect for him and his position here in this municipality. So go ahead, CAO. Oh, in April. So we will be having something formal in April for the chief. It's just whether COVID, we're hoping to loosen something up. Plus it might be able to be outside, or we can open the garage bay doors and be a bit more socially distant, but that we can honor him. We have a gift to present him as well, which we'll do in person in April. So we'll convey that to all council members and some members of the public that we want to have there as well. So just a quick mayor's update. It's been 100 days since the kickoff of the Radon Test Challenge. Test kit challenge. It's time to return your test kit to the municipal office. So if you know of anybody who got one of these kits, we ask they return them now. It is time to return them for the data collection. Please remember that fluctuating temperatures mean that ice conditions are unstable. Additionally, residents are encouraged to stay away from fast-moving water courses that arise with the spring melt. I cannot stress this enough. It's something that always has worried me, and I realize that sometimes it's irrational, but sometimes it's not. And the last thing I would want to have is anybody succumb to hypothermia or have one of our volunteer firefighters having to go and get somebody out of any sort of water course. So please use extreme caution at this time. Half load season is now in effect on our roads, and the restriction takes effect today and will be in place till April 30th. So half loads are now on. And while we're on the roads, we recognize that the thaw comes out of the ground. As the thaw comes out of the ground, it impacts our rural road network. So please use caution. Please be advised that roads crews will be monitoring and maintaining roads as weather permits. So we can grade the roads as many times as we like, but every time that there's a heavy rainfall, that will wash away part of the efforts. But I am very encouraged by the new director and the commitment to drainage, which should help some of these roads and also make things easier over the long term. Did you know that TLTI offers a youth bursary? Applications are due at the end of this month, and eligible township students could be awarded $200 to $500 to contribute to their post-secondary study. So if you know of anybody who is in their last year of high school, please encourage them to make their application. Town of Gananoque and the township are pleased to announce the launch of the 4th intake of the ever popular Business Chronicles. It's a really great opportunity to profile your small and local businesses. Contact the municipality to learn more about how to participate. And we would ask that you can also speak to somebody in Gananoque, and McKenna Modler has been working on this project for quite some time. It's been the focus of some very large marketing campaigns through the National Post, Globe and Mail, what have you, and it's been very well received. I believe that it was even said earlier tonight, local tourism is what is going to keep us afloat through all of this, and it is what has kept us afloat. So staycations, stay local, support local businesses. We can't stress it enough, so that everybody does their part. Property owners, you should have received your tax bill by now. If you haven't, we ask that you contact the office at our phone number 659-2415. And I know we've actually had a number of calls. So if you haven't received it, let us know. We can email if we have a direct contact. Don't have to physically pick up the bill. So go ahead, Councillor Rowe.
Have we maintained the usual due date on our tax order?
March 19th.
March 19th?
Yeah, March 19th is when taxes are due.
Thank you.
If you are struggling due to COVID, another reason why you should be calling in and speaking to our Treasury Department. We are working with some people in regards to this, and we're happy to help. It's easier to help if we have heads up versus after the fact when the interest is charged. So please contact us. Later this month, we're moving to daylight savings time, and it's a great time to change batteries and your smoke detectors. Very important. I just wanted to say one last thing, and it's unfortunate that Kate's not here. The treasurer Tyndall has gone home for the evening because the weather is not exactly great, and she has a long drive home. There's been some confusion in the public space in regards to taxes and tax rates. So our esteemed treasurer put together a very comprehensive but yet simplistic view of how taxes have come to be where they are in the last 2 years, and percentages versus actual dollars and cents. And it's an excellent way to educate yourself. And I know that our staff will be endeavoring to send that out via the newsletter. There's a part of our newsletter that will be going out. It will be created in a fact section in the on the website. It's also going to go out in the rec guide. So one of the critiques that I received as mayor was that we are not communicating enough, which I find somewhat ironic, considering we've gone back to a paper newsletter, which we keep sending out. We now have online meetings where you can see and you can participate and pick up, and we've had online meetings where you can watch them at any given time. But this format, you don't have to come to a council meeting to raise your hand or to be in the gallery, to be noticed, to be recognized. We've made every effort in this municipality, I think, to communicate. It's whether or not people want to look for it. And the irony, I think, is also the fact that we're not in the newspaper for the wrong reasons. And that's why it seems quiet here. And so just to bookend that I still remain very supportive and proud of our senior management team and the efforts that they've made over COVID-19 to manage the funds that are not ours, that are the taxpayers, with the utmost care. And that the tax increases that we've seen over the past 2 years were unfortunate but necessary. But yet, when you put it in the context of our neighboring municipality making a 1.6% increase, equating to $40 on the same MPAC assessment, here in this municipality, our 6% township tax increase is $60. So percentages really mean nothing in the grand scheme of things when you're looking at dollar and cents and you're talking about budgets. Obviously, they're relevant to our budgets and what the increase are. But when you're talking about what it costs to live in this municipality versus other municipalities, I ran into a relative of the deputy mayor's who lives in a neighboring, not neighboring, couple municipalities over. He says, "I've never paid so much tax in my life." He said, I won't single out the tax rate or the township, but that I just continue to remain steadfast that we are on the right path. We are moving ahead with asset management. We are doing all the right things to make sure that this municipality does not fall behind. And I will end with that. Councillor Groh.
Just a quick question. The update that will be provided to the public, would it be the same update that was provided to council?
Pretty much, but I think it will be more of an infographic versus, like the email for the public that are listening. The email that was provided to council for information purposes was more of a spreadsheet. And so the staff are looking at making it as easy to read as possible. There was a lot of information for council in that email, so that if anybody asks more specific questions, that we could answer them intelligently and succinctly. But as people have seen in the newsletter, there's only so much space on that, so they'll be boiling it down as simplistically. But the overall proposed tax increase for 2021, I'll restate it, is proposed to be 3.3%. That is not set in stone. County budget has not been set. We are still trying to hash out county budget. It has been a painful process this year, I'll be quite honest. They desperately need an asset management plan that is much more in line with our roads, and their roads stuff is hard right now because every municipality seems to have a different understanding. It is not clear. So they have a new director at county, and my hope is that he will bring some clarity to the process going forward. I still remain on the CIO selection committee at county. We're still interviewing. We're interviewing this week. Mapleview Lodge is still moving ahead with the major expansion. I'm on that committee as well. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else on the committee if there is anything that's coming up, I'll speak to it at council. That's coming up for committee of the whole next week. I'll speak to this group at council to let you know if there's anything should be on our radar. Oh, we've had a lot to deal with lately. Thanks, Councillor Grell's reminding me. So a couple of things. St. Lawrence Parks Commission. I've received a number of inquiries from individuals who are upset that I would publicly support the St. Lawrence Parks Commission to request not to plow the parkway. It's not that I don't want the walkers who believe that that is a safe way of using the bike path. My concern is the inconsistency at which the snow is plowed. I spoke to a number of residents and received a number of emails. That is under the jurisdiction of the St. Lawrence Parks Commission. St. Lawrence Parks Commission is looking at asking for input from Front of Young and us. They want to talk to the Ontario Trails Alliance about possibly managing it. That meeting is happening this week, and I don't have a whole lot of information about that, but I will bring it up now because I believe that they need help with it, and I'm not sure where they feel our role plays. Go ahead, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you. And through you, Your Worship, a resident asked me, how would that come before this council? And the fact is, it struck me, I don't know the answer exactly, but I answered by saying that the St. Lawrence Park Commission should put before us a proposal, something that we can table. It's not for us to advance. It's their property, it's their business. They would have to come to us, would they not?
So the St. Lawrence Parks Commission owns the North Lane and the bike path.
Correct.
Correct. We have no jurisdiction. My comments that were made were totally in context in the newspaper, and that is I was supporting the St. Lawrence Parks Commission, asking people not to plow for safety reasons. And I took quite a bit of flack for that. And I stood my ground with some people because they believe that I'm in favor of snowmobilers more so than walkers, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I am in favor of safety when it comes to that asset. I want to see as many people using that path, and they surely have over this pandemic. It has been used in ways that you couldn't keep up with counting people on the parkway, whether it be near Gananoque or Brockville. But what remains to be seen is active management from the St. Lawrence Parks Commission. Maybe that sounds harsh, but we field a lot of the calls from all of this, and we wear a lot of the paint, and that might end soon with our discussions, because I'm all for supporting the St. Lawrence Parks Commission. We have a beautiful asset that runs through our township, and I'm happy to partner with them and work with them. But as far as them downloading the responsibility onto this municipality, that is not the discussion that we will be having. So unless my council tells me different. But it is their asset to manage and move forward with. There was something else. Runciman. Well, Mr. Runciman was on TV in regards to this and was appreciating the support from this municipality because we have the longest stretch in our municipality. We will be dealing with Mr. Runciman and Holly Q, who's the head of the St. Lawrence Parks Commission, going forward. But we definitely want to keep that bridge there, but it's not our asset, and it remains theirs. So, okay. I think that's everything else. We'll adjourn into form council. I'll put that motion on the floor, and then we have a bylaw to appoint the acting fire chief who is with us this evening. So moved by Councillor Olkey and seconded by Councillor Grell that committee of the whole adjourn to form council. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it's carried. Okay, so we're now in council, and the motion that's coming forward is moved by Councillor Olkey and seconded by Councillor Foti that 3 readings and final passage be granted to bylaw number 21-017, being a bylaw to appoint an acting fire chief for the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands. Discussion on this motion. Go ahead, Councillor Guerrero.
Just for clarity, we had discussed that, of course, fire chief position will go to competition. So just for clarity, when we say appointed, the acting, is it clear? Is that clarity enough? Understanding that this is a temporary situation, or do we need to time frame it here? Do we need to add anything for clarity's sake? Thank you.
Go ahead, CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I don't think we need to add in a time frame for that. We are going to do our recruitment process. We need to have a position, someone occupying the chair of fire chief in order to carry out the responsibilities under the Fire Prevention and Protection Act. So there are statutory requirements that are vested in the chief. And so we need to appoint somebody to be able to perform those duties, inspections, all that sort of thing. So that's all this is doing. And we will run our recruitment process and select a candidate in due course.
Okay. Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Again, just for clarification, what is due course?
Well, we have to initiate the recruitment process. We need to post the job posting, which is in the works right now. We're developing the job posting. We'll post it. We'll keep it open for a month, see what we get candidate wise, do our interviews. So, if we select somebody that's already working somewhere, they'll have to provide notice and all this. So, we're talking 2-3 months at least.
Just follow up. I mean, we've known for how long now that Chief Lawson was going to retire. So why is the process not begun?
I think it was more based on the fire master plan and trying to get the information out of that as well before we started that. Is that correct, CAO? That's
correct. And also Chief Lawson indicated his intention to retire in January. January was a busy month for us all. We've actually started the process. We've done an interview with Chief Lawson to discuss the qualities that he sees in the chair. As someone occupying the chair of chief, also discussing the workings of the fire department. And so with the assistance of Councillor Olkey and Councillor Jameson, we formed a set of criteria. We just have to get it documented, reviewed one more time. We'll reflect it in the job description and it'll get posted.
So, okay. Any further, Councillor Maybe?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Again, due diligence is important. We have had many positions where we've had candidates come forward and then we've had to go back out and do more. So, taking time to make sure the right person's in the seat is more important than trying to rush this through, in my mind. And again, we have a very capable deputy chief at this moment who will soon be the acting chief. And I don't have any problem with that happening, and getting the right person in the seat is more important. Thank you.
Any further comment or question? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried. Congratulations, Acting Fire Chief, Mr. Pryor. So good luck with the motley crew that you have. We know that there's a good group of people over there, and we look forward to seeing the training center continue to grow. And I understand that your training center is already starting to run your courses and starting to move forward. Perfect. So training center is online and onwards and upwards. So I'm sure that the fire department will continue to grow, and hopefully our recruitment will show that. So the last motion at hand is moved by Deputy Mayor Lackey and seconded by Councillor Guerrero that council adjourn. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried